Today on the show, Rob Bree has worked across businesses for multi years, going over 40 years, helps business owners who feel stuck, revenue has flatlined, unsure where to go, too much noise in the open market, and helps them cut through all that noise and helps them to build and go from survivor to growth mode. So Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you for having me.
You know, so Rob, you've been in the industry around the corporate world and now going out on yourself and being a growth coach and all the rest of that. Where did it start? Where was Little Rob from, and what is the origin story of yourself?
Little Rob, that would take more time than we've got in the show. I think probably the short answer is reasonably tough childhood. I had to basically bring myself up. And in my teenage years, got my girlfriend pregnant. So highly motivated to get a job, get through university, support my family, and kind of came out of the box pretty hard with corporate life. Got a job with Coca-Cola, and that really set me up really, really well. So by sort of 27 years old, I was already, I wouldn't say a senior manager, but a middle manager. So it sort of set me up well for a life in corporates.
So, you said kid, young age, teenager, right?
44 today.
Yeah.
Today's is 44.
44.
It's older than you.
Yeah, correct. My first compliment of today. And you're talking about a young kid going through, getting the corporate world, 27, senior management, as if, that's how it should happen. But naturally, that's not the case in most society and most people and stuff. So, I just want to know is hard upbringing, but what was there that still gave you that drive, like that made it that you still kept going? Because you could have just gone left instead of right, and the story would have been totally different, right?
Sure. Yeah. Look, as far as career choice goes, I think it's hard to know why you choose the things you choose. What I do know is there was sort of a inflection point when I was at university. I'd through high school and early university, I'd been studying economics and accounting, a little bit of law, and I think towards the end of year two, I heard about this thing called marketing, and I sort of started looking at marketing papers and some management papers, and sort of shifted away from accounting to more management side of things, and I think it sort of fulfilled a part of me that was really interested in things like communication, sort of anthropology, sociology, and I'd done a lot of jobs working. I worked at Woolworths when I was a teenager. I worked in a gas station pumping gas for years and years, and I was sort of interested in brands and the way business worked. And like the gas station I worked in, a good example, it was a mobile station, and there were two guys that owned the station. They were both getting on in years. And sort of being part of that team that makes a reasonably big gas station, it was gas station out west, make that work, and also having a little bit to do with the mobile reps and kind of seeing what corporate life was about. So I guess I was sort of interested in those things, and then when you combine that with this kind of need or drive to look after my family, I was looking for a career that would sort of meet my needs, and I had a bit of a creative side to my personality, and I think marketing ultimately fulfilled that. And when you're in your 20s and you get a job at a company like Coke, I mean, it's a pretty good match. It was an awesome culture, very aggressive culture, very hardworking, quite youthful. Most of the people that worked at Coke, certainly as far as the sales managers and sales reps, that sort of thing, and people doing some of the corporate type work were in their 20s and 30s. So so very vibrant culture. And Coca-Cola as a company globally has that. It's a real what back then I would have described as a winning culture. These days I might have a slightly different way of putting it, but yeah.
Yeah, they've been humbled a few times, maybe almost right. There's a few challenges trying to take them on from that time period. Yeah, so it's interesting how you saw it, and and understanding what you're good at or you're interested in at. As you said, you picked up some stuff from the brand reps and the branding and the organizations that you're in the gas stations to the Woolworths, and seeing that whole marketing thing seems to be where I want to be or where I want to go with, right?
Yeah, I was lucky. When I was at Varsity, you have to do papers, and for one of my papers, I did a project on the launch of New Coke and how it failed and why it failed and all of that, and it was failing, I think, at the time. And I also did a one on the launch of Diet Coke, which at that time was still quite topical. The whole thing of diet drinks, diet food, that was relatively new. Of course, it's old hat now, but it meant that I knew a lot about that business before I went for the job interview. I literally got to the job interview and said, "Oh, you don't need to interview anybody else." And the guy, his name was Rob Morgan. He was the guy that interviewed me and ultimately became my boss. He said, "Well, why not?" I go, "Because at the end of this interview, you're going to give me the job." And at the end of the interview, he gave me the job.
You wish employment was that good to these days, right?
I was 23 years old and pretty full of it, right?
Oh, I mean, most of us are when we're going for an interview. I can tell you I am when I go to an interview, but I mean, in modern times, you go into an interview, then it's a second interview, then it's a third interview, and then they scan you, and then they...
There was none of that.
None of that,
none
right?
Of that. No. There was, I got interviewed by the recruiter and then interviewed by the
company,
the Coke guy, and yeah.
So marketing's where you landed, right, and ended up there. So, take me through sort of that time period around marketing and what you were seeing through the organization. So, I mean, you've been across companies like Coca-Cola, ASB, DB Breweries, even Heineken. You must be thirsty a lot with most of these companies.
Yeah, I drink a lot of those products.
I was going to say,
I was a much thinner man 20 years ago. Yeah, 40 years ago. I was going to
say, there's a sign. There's a sign here with some of these organizations. So talk me through some of the marketing pieces that you saw across that and sort of commonalities.
I think in general terms, I always liked working in fun categories. I liked working in areas where what you did was not the difference between life and death for somebody. You're selling food and beverage mainly. And then I had a brief stint in those days with ASB Bank. I was there for a couple of years, and that was much more serious kind of environment. Yeah, I guess answering your question, you learn a lot when you work in those environments because every day you're dealing with issues, solving problems, working towards kind of goals that you've set or the business has set for you. And you learn a lot about what it takes to be successful in an environment like that. And one of the things I learned reasonably early in the piece was if you want to succeed in a large business where you're dealing with lots of people, you've got to be a good communicator. That's a big part of it. And you've got to be able to identify what's important to people and help them to solve problems. I think I was successful insofar as I was able to position myself as someone who got stuff done, who solved problems, who found a way through difficult circumstances. Maybe just one little example. When I was at ASB Bank, we were at that time only Auckland and Northland, and the company had only really recently moved from being Auckland Savings Bank to ASB Bank. And the reason for that name change was they had aspirations to go national, and I worked for a very clever lady, Jane Freeman. She was a young woman, but very, very clever, highly respected in the bank and in the industry generally. And we were looking at different ways that we could do this thing, and I was able to bring my Coca-Cola experience to the bank. And basically sold to her and our bosses that what we should do is just open one branch, and that branch was Hamilton, and that we should get Hamilton right, and once we get Hamilton right, then we could roll that model out across the rest of the Waikato region through the Bay of Plenty, etc. And that's what we did, So I think that's a good example of, you've got a business challenge, which is the company wanted to go national. I think the worst thing we could have done at the time was gone and opened 20 branches.
Yeah.
The risk profile of that would have been very high. We could have been rejected as the bank of orcs, because as it is today, Auckland was viewed with some suspicion in the regions. But we went to Hamilton. We did a really good job of that. We did quite a creative opening, and within 6 months, kind of debriefed that and had the confidence to then carry on. Yeah.
So interesting. You said before about how bringing Coca-Cola skills across into ASB and obviously totally two different environments. Banking sector as like insurance sector in New Zealand is very corporate, very regulated, very in the box, right?
Yes, yeah.
And Coca-Cola is totally the opposite of that.
That's right. A very different culture.
Yeah. I'm really interested to know, as much as you brought one idea to the other one that was delivered success, is tell me how trying to, with yourself going into that space and the marketing and leadership and success is how would you differentiate how to get the most success out of, say, the teams at ASB compared to Coca-Cola, right? Two organizations, one is dynamic, one is forward-thinking, edgy, Coke, anything like that. Heineken would fall into that space. Your Red Bull market, that would be, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
And then you've got a corporate inside the box.
Yeah.
Talk me through the differentiations between how they would work and how you try and get success out of the two different ones.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in both cases, whether you're talking Coke or ASB, you're part of a large organisation, and there are many people there. So you're only one person in the team, and I think in that situation, what's really helpful is if you understand what your role is and how you can make a difference in the organisation. I think as far as the transition from Coke to ASB and the difference in the ASB environment, like you say, highly corporate, a very planful environment. A lot of planning, a lot of internal consultation, a lot of documents. Very difficult to get shit done, right? Versus, say, the Coca-Cola environment, which was, if you're going to come to work today, then come to work to make a difference. Otherwise, fuck off, basically.
Yeah.
That was basically the culture. It's very action oriented. And so I think the value of the ideas that I brought from the Coca-Cola environment to the ASB environment were helping in that marketing team, which was a large marketing team. It had a sponsorship division, had a business development division, had its own print division. Is helping with identifying what are the critical success factors in this business. What is it we actually need to deliver in order to generate a result, as opposed to what can happen in a corporate type environment where there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of meetings, many of which are useful, because it's sharing of ideas and things like that. But one of the things I've always taught my teams, and I say to my clients these days, what are we actually going to do?
Yeah.
We need to be really clear about what our goals are, and we've got a number of different things we could do. We have to pick one, and we actually have to say what we're going to do. And what we're going to do might not be go out and fire off the big guns day one. You might go and do something very small, see how that goes, and then you can take another step, etc. But I think that without being stupid, without kind of throwing out the rule book, I think being able to approach everything. The Coca-Cola environment is, in reality, every day you're at war. Yeah. You're at war with somebody. When I was there, we were at war with Pepsi because Pepsi launched during the time that I was there. But, whether it's Pepsi or another competitor, a juice brand, a Red Bull, a V, you're at war. So when you're at war, you come to work ready to fight.
Yeah.
And I think, not all the time, but sometimes that way of thinking can be really, really useful. Where particularly when businesses are stuck, and you mentioned this in the intro, a lot of the work that I do with my clients, the reason they've brought me in is they need help. If things were going really, really well, going swimmingly for them, then they wouldn't bring in a business coach or a consultant to help them with that stuff. And a lot of the time, what it is they're stuck. They've got a lot of problems, challenges. They've got a lot of information or no information. They don't know how to move forward. And so, what I'm trying to do with my clients and was doing in my corporate life was to understand what's the pathway forward, what's going to deliver us the growth, whatever that growth might be, because we're not always talking about revenue growth. It might be market share, it might be profitability, whatever it is. What is it that's going to deliver us that growth, and what's the kind of order of works that's going to bring that about? What are we going to do first, then what, and how do you orchestrate that in a way that the business can cope with? Because a lot of the time when you're dealing with SMEs, they don't have a lot of resources, so and you don't want to stress them out because you'll have people walking out the door, right? Or you'll have people just falling over. They just won't be able to do it, right? So you've got to figure out what are the capabilities of this business, and how do I build capability, or how do we build capability in order to go after the goals that we've agreed on.
Yeah. So true. And one thing, coming through from the message, you're talking about obviously the organizations and then talking about your current clients, but one of the biggest things that's happened to yourself over the last period of time is you went from being the corporate world and got to a point that you decided you were going to go out on your own, or you're going to do your own thing, right? So, what was the decision to go, you think about it, hard upbringing, young family, get into the corporate world, successful, Why jump the ship?
I know.
Why jump
do
off?
that?
Yeah, I'm sitting there going, I know your story, and I'm sitting there going, why? What made you go from
the dumbest decision I ever made? Right? Why would you leave a beer job to go and do something much harder?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, talk me through the whole
where I was paid for selling, marketing beer brands. I think, sometimes you have to have the benefit of. You have to be able to look in the rearview mirror sometimes, Lawrence, to figure the answers to those questions out, right? And it took me a while to answer that question. And I think there was definitely a parting of the ways between me and corporate life that happened. When was it? Around about 2004. So over 20 years ago now. And if I'm honest, what happened was I was really good at what I did. And I think if you spoke to any of my colleagues or employers, they would agree with that statement. I was not just me blowing my own horn here. I was really good at what I did, but I was terrible at the politics. I never knew when to shut up. I was, when I was a young guy, I was pretty hot-headed. I really backed myself. People told me I was good, and I believed them. So ego was a problem. Yeah. And I've got people who were my bosses during that period. Some of whom are still friends, some not so much. But I still respect them, and I know they respect me. But I must have been a hard guy to have around at times because I could push pretty hard on what I believed. And there were some times when I should have shut up and kind of just drank the Kool-Aid and done what I was told, and I didn't. And you pay the price for that. And so I think what happened. The last real job I had was a contract, and it was with a pharmaceutical company. It was a great job. I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, when the contract ended, the role that I was supposed to go to in Melbourne with the same company was disestablished. There was a big restructure that happened in New Zealand and Australia. And so I sort of found myself kind of, sucking my thumb going, what do I do now? And I thought, well, I'll do some consulting. That's how it started. I think it's how it starts for most people. And my very first client was that pharmaceutical company. And they were a client for a further 3 years.
So when you say consulting, marketing, business
Yeah,
growth,
marketing and strategy.
Yeah.
The role I had in that business was I was sales and marketing director. And for a period of time, the managing director was on maternity leave, and so I was working with the CFO. So but essentially myself and the CFO ran the company until she came back, and she was part of the crew that was disestablished as well. But what was I going to say?
With the strategy and bringing it back and moving it along, right?
I think what I noticed, right, when you're in a job in a company, you all going well, you're paid a lot of money, all going well, and you get status, and you pay a price for that, right? Which is, as I say, sometimes you have to eat shit, right? When you go out consulting, suddenly there's someone saying, "Hey, thanks, Lawrence, for that work. What you did, I really appreciate that." It's a different relationship. That the hierarchy is sort of gone a little bit. I mean, you're obviously there as a supplier, but they've brought you in because they want your expertise. And when you deliver that expertise, they are grateful, and so the nature of the relationship is a little bit different. And soon after that, I started getting industry roles, working in roles where I was sort of executive director for the food industry. I then ended up being executive director for the research industry. So, I started to build a career based on a number of other factors that meant I was able to keep going. And as long as you've got enough work, you can make a good living as a consultant. As long as there's enough work, because that's the hard thing. You're always out there chasing the next job.
Because that has evolved to fundamentally what you are today. When you're calling yourself a growth coach. I understand what it is, and you understand what it is, but the audience out there might not necessarily understand a growth coach. So explain to me in real basic, what is a growth coach?
Well, growth coach is my version of business coach. I mean, I work with Prime Strategies Group, and they're a group of business coaches. So in essence, I'm a business coach. But growth is the thing that really excites me, is helping businesses to grow. Now, the reality is, Lawrence, when you go into a business, I was having this conversation with you the other day. Sometimes you go in and there's a significant problem in an area of the business, and it's obvious what that problem is, and you get in there and you set about solving that problem. And that's more sort of the consulting approach, and you don't really move on to anything else until you've solved that problem. We talked about, patient walks into the doctor's clinic and he's bleeding below the knee. You got to stop the blood and then see what you can do to get him healthy again. But a lot of the time when you go into a business, there are multiple issues. So part of the early part of the process when you're talking with clients or potential clients, you're trying to discover what are the problems and opportunities in that business, and more importantly, what's causing those problems. Because it's relatively easy to diagnose the symptoms. You can say, hey, we've got high staff turnover. Hey, we're not getting paid on time. Hey, our margins are too low. Hey, we keep running out of money. Hey, we're losing market share. But those things are all symptoms.
Yeah, it's driven by something, right?
Yeah, and so what motivates me is to go, well, why is that happening? How is it happening? What are we doing about it? What are we going to do about it? So that we're not putting more Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids. I go to a lot of businesses. There's a lot of Band-Aids. And I think the risk is you go in and you just put more Band-Aids on. Those Band-Aids aren't thick enough, so I'll put that other stuff, just wrap it round and round. Eventually the client's like a mummy, You've got a mummified business. The only reason they keep on going is because they're held together with bandages, right? And you want to avoid that. You want to restore that business first to health and then to growth. But sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes what really works is if you can find something that you can achieve and deliver value for that business quickly, that gives the business confidence to then do something else,
True, because, a lot of people don't realize, in business is sometimes stability for 6 months is in his inverted commas growth, because I'm not going backwards, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So by growth is not necessarily naturally 0.1, 0.2, 1%, 3%. Sometimes it can be stability because that is seen as a positive, right?
Yeah.
Growth is going in the right direction for now with the growth with the step up that we need later.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
as you said, sometimes a quick win allows the business to think, okay, let's take on more stuff or let's look at more challenging pieces. And a quick win could just be, hey, we need to just stabilize for a bit of time.
What New Zealand businesses tend to do is they do the things they've already done.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if the way they solved problems in the past was hiring people, they'll hire some more people. You know, if the way they've solved problems in the past is by bringing new technology, and they'll bring in new technology. But they're not necessarily fixing the right problem. You know, if you bring more people into a broken business, all you're doing is increasing the cost and creating a culture of, I hate to say this, but people who are you're setting them up for failure. Mm-hmm. You know, you've actually got to set the business. This is such a cliche, right? But you've got to set the business up for success before you actually start doing some of those growth driving behaviors. Yeah. I'll give you an example. So many years ago, I worked for a fast food company. I won't name it because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But I worked for a fast food company, and it was a big fast food company, right? One of the biggest. And they hired me because the business was going backwards at a rate of about 3% a year.
Crazy.
Yeah, and this big company, I'm talking well over $100 million, well over. And so the board were coming under real scrutiny about what are they doing about this problem. The shareholders were not happy, right? So my job was stop the rot. That's the first thing. But before you can do that, you got to understand why. So we did some we didn't do a huge amount of research. We got a few people in for some focus groups. I sat behind a mirror and listened to the conversations. And it was pretty obvious early on that whilst people loved the product, the brand experience was lousy, and it was worse than lousy. They actually said they felt dirty after engaging with our business, right? And then, having found out that little nugget, we did a little bit of quantitative research, and we were able to find out that about half the people in New Zealand who regularly eat fast food, and when I say regularly, 3 times a week or more, wouldn't eat our brand, wouldn't touch it. So you cut off from half the market. So before you can really turn that business around, you've got to fix that problem.
Yep.
You've got to start saying, well, how do I make this business more attractive
to the rest of the market,
to the non-users, before I can actually get any growth? Because I could, and they'd been doing a very good job of selling more and more to fewer and fewer people, but you can only do that for so long. It gets harder and harder to do it. In the end, we identified the issues and we ended up with an action plan which had about 60 bullet points on it. Now, that's a lot of bullet points, right? A lot of bullets. So we had to work through that in a planned way. And we did that over a couple of years. And then long after I'd moved on, the guy who was the managing director, he was still working through that plan. And that particular business grew very well in the 10 years following after I'd left. Yeah. But I had that thing where I woke up one morning and I didn't care whether people ate another burger or not. And you go, if you don't care whether they're eating your burgers, probably now's a good time to leave.
Good time to move on, right? Yeah. If you don't want to, if you're working at Red Bull and you say you've had enough of Red Bull, then it's time to go.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's interesting. You talk about coming into companies and everything else. Is when you're coming in as a consultant or growth coach and all that sort of stuff, and you clients, has there ever been a company where someone's asked you and you've said no? Put you a bit on the spot. Has there ever been a client or company where you've just gone either, and not no from a political reason, not no, I don't support that brand, but no, it's too far gone. Or
It's too hard.
It's too hard. Yeah, come on. We're not all gods, right? So like there must be. Has that ever been, or there's been one when you've gone like, holy crap, this is going to be a hard.
There have certainly been companies that I've gone into, a cold call, or you know, someone's organised a referral, and I've gone and I've met with them, and I've gone, Jesus, I hope I don't get this work, because There was one company I went to, and the guy, their main product was made from plaster of Paris, and believe me, every freaking surface in the business was covered in dust of plaster of Paris, and I came out covered. Like I was wearing something similar to what I'm wearing now. Where I walked out and there's bloody plaster of Paris dust on every inch of my clothing. I thought, I hope that guy doesn't get me. But no, going back to your question, I sort of have a rule, right? And the rule is, I don't say no. If someone asks me for my help, and they're willing to pay a reasonable, I'm not the richest guy out there, but if they're willing to pay a reasonable fee for my help, I'm going to do everything I can to help them. So I don't recall ever saying no.
But there's been some interesting meetings.
Yeah, if you met some of my clients, you'd go, Rob, you've got some very interesting clients. Maybe you should have said no. And maybe they would wish that they'd said no to me.
You're talking about, the success, talking about the food business that 10 years later, the growth and all the rest and implementing it. We've got to be honest with a lot of things, right? It's not everything works every time.
No,
okay,
that's right.
And that's one thing I want to say is there isn't a golden nugget or golden bullet or that or the joker that works for every single company. Sometimes
there is no silver bullet.
And sometimes it falls over. So I'd love to see, hand on heart, has there been times with the greatest intention, all the rest of it, but it couldn't be salvaged, and not because of what you didn't do, but it's just situationally it didn't work, or company wise didn't work. Or
I think typically, if you're a marketer, you're an optimist.
Yeah.
If you're a business owner, you're an optimist, because you wouldn't get into it unless you were, right? So we probably have a bad habit in New Zealand of doing things too late for too long before we give up, before we say no. But yeah, I think with the best of intent, you get in there, you figure out a strategy, you execute it to the best of your ability with the resources that you've got, right? The people, the money, the tools, the capabilities that you've got. And sometimes it doesn't work. I think the important thing is when it doesn't work, don't keep throwing money at it. I've worked with businesses where you go in there and they're 100% committed to this thing, and I've literally said to them, I think you should stop that thing now, walk away from that, take those resources and put them into something more worthwhile. And we've killed things. There's literally a question that I asked my clients. A couple of weeks ago, we were working through some stuff, and we were looking at our product ranges, and we literally had a Post-it note on the wall, and remember that, that TV program, Love It or List It?
Yes.
I love that program. We had a Post-it note up on the wall, keep it or kill it. And we just went through and we just were ruthless, and we said, we're keeping that, we're killing that. Now, by killing it, what I mean is we're going to sell it out. We're just not going to buy anymore. We're not going to replace it. We're going to find something else. We're going to focus on this thing rather than that thing. I think one of the things we're guilty of in New Zealand, because the New Zealand market is such a small market, as businesses, we try to do too much because we go, I'm going to go after this opportunity, because I believe that the more I do, the better the result I'm going to get. The reality is most of the time, the less you do, the better the result you're going to get. If you look at any sports person, the best sports people tend to be specialists, You don't drive in Formula One and drive in something else. You just focus on Formula One until you can't.
Yeah.
Right. And I think one of my mantras, if I have such a thing, is about focus and saying to my clients, what is it we're going to focus on, and then within that, what are the 2 or 3 things we're going to do that are going to drive the result? Not the 10 things, the 2 or 3, because in reality, we're shit at doing more than 3 things. You know, when you have a management team and you say, right, there's this long list of business priorities, I guarantee you in a year's time, that same long list will be there and they'll have made very little progress on any of them. Whereas in companies that go, this year, we're focusing on X.
Yep.
This next year, we're focusing on Y. And even doing that in 90-day sprints, you know, like with a lot of my clients, I'll say, okay, we do have to get these things done this year, but we're going to do these ones in the first 30 days. When those are done or nearly done, then we'll start on the next ones, you know, and try not to do too much at once. Yeah.
So true. I mean, I'd spoken previously to a gentleman called Ash Pamar. He was running for a seat in previous elections, and we won't go into that, but he was having a seat, and I had a chat to him about, you know, what he was standing for around the elections and everything else. And he was one of the first people that, you know, ever in a politician that said, and he said to me, goes, I am good at three things. Well, I'm standing, and that's what's important.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, he says, as society, we got to move away thinking that because I'm in this space, I'm supposed to know this much.
Mm-mm.
I only know these three things.
Mm-mm.
You can't expect me. There's someone else for the other three things,
Correct.
and there's someone else for the other three
That's
things,
right,
and there's other things for the thing. And organizations the same, right? And it's that whole thing of know what you're good at, but then openly go, I'm not good at the rest. Right? So this is the one or two things we're going to work on. This is the one or two things that we're good in this space. Then do that.
That's right.
And then figure out that grey space.
And that applies to me as well.
Yeah.
You know, when I'm working with a client, you know, I'm really honest with them. These are the things that I'm going to be able to help you with. These things, once we've decided that those are a priority, we're going to get someone who's expert at those things to do those things. You know, I'm not going to try and build websites while I'm coaching the business, you know. I'm not going to try and do design or implement a new system overhaul. We're going to get someone that knows how to do that. My job is to help the client figure out what they need to do. And what's the process? How are we going to go about doing that? And once we've identified that, right, okay, now let's go find the person, the company, whatever that is expert at that. You see, you know, when you're a business coach, it's no different to being a sports coach. You know, you don't go onto the field. You don't score the tries. You stand on the sideline and you make judgments and you support the team to do the things they've got to do. I like to think of my role. Do you like Star Wars? The Star Wars movies?
Oh, I'm just going to say yes, so I don't get shot, but I'll go yes.
Most people love Star Wars, right? The original Star Wars, the 1977 Star Wars.
Look behind you.
Oh, right.
There's bring it into camera. Look at that.
Star Wars, the original Star Wars. You know, you've got Luke Skywalker and you've got Obi-Wan Kenobi. They have very different roles. Luke Skywalker, he's the hero of the story. So in my mind, my client is the hero of the story. I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm the guy giving advice, asking questions, kind of looking down the road and going, if he does that, what's going to happen? Can I influence him to go in a slightly different direction than that one where I can see a car crash ahead, you know? And it's interesting. It's an interesting way of thinking about it because at the end of the day, Luke Skywalker is the hero of the story alongside the Harrison Ford character, you know? But Luke Skywalker would not have achieved what he achieved without Obi-Wan Kenobi.
100%.
Because Obi-Wan Kenobi had to teach him about the Force, right? That's my job. My job is to teach them about the Force. And it's similar in The Hobbit, right? You know, Gandalf's role in The Hobbit. Without Gandalf, they probably never would have got on top of that whole ring problem, you know?
That is so true. Rob, I love that. You're going, 40 plus years now.
Yeah, 62.
Okay. 62.
62 in December.
So 40 plus years in corporate art and stuff. What is sort of a common a very basic common mistake you see most business owners that you've spoken to or gone across that you see in the open market? When you walk in there, what is something that's quite common and you go, oh yeah, you guys are doing that, they're doing that, and they don't realize it's sort of a common mistake you see in.
Yeah, there's probably a few.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the first one is they make their businesses too complicated, too complex. Their internal process, and I'm not so much talking about the process of delivering their goods or services,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm talking about the processes of running the business, the management processes, the decision-making processes, the meetings culture. Too much complexity. I think the very successful businesses, everyone's very clear about what their role is, and they're given the authority to do their role. And they're really, really clear about what they can and can't do, and when they need to ask and when they need to do. I think if you can get that kind of culture in place in a business, that makes a big difference. The other big mistake I see a lot of the time is the leader of the business doesn't understand that they are the business. Particularly in an SME, the owner, to a very large extent, is the business. How the owner thinks, speaks, acts is going to be reflected right through the business. And you can get two very similar businesses that do very similar things who have quite different leaders, and you will have very different outcomes based on what those leaders are like. The biggest problem I see is that leaders either don't know or they forget that they are the leader. They try to do too much. They get in and do, rather than remembering that their job is to basically point the torch beam in the right direction and then say, come on, guys, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing, and how are we going to do it? Get everybody running alongside each other to actually achieve it,
I was just going to actually ask, how important is leadership in an organization, irrespective of size?
It's the most important thing. It's the most important thing. Everything else is secondary to leadership. Because like I said before, the decisions that the leader makes they are ultimately going to decide whether the business will or won't succeed. The decisions that the leader supports, how they treat their team, how they empower the people in their team to actually get on and do the job.
It's true. I mean, one of the most easiest examples about leadership, whether you support the leadership or not, but the opinion of the top leader and the impact of the company would be Elon Musk and Tesla, right?
Yeah.
So he can with his power, he can control a large focus point of the world. And there's been moments when he's jumped off the batshit train and hit another one. And company stocks plummet and all the rest of it. And there was a period where there's a period where I was talking to colleagues where I was like, I think he's doing insider trading because he would do something crazy today. The stock would drop 10%. 48 hours later.
You might want to edit that out of the podcast if you don't want a defamation suit.
I'm happy because he got charged. No, he got officially charged for it. They just couldn't find the evidence because he would open his mouth.
And he's still suing people that say that.
And then the price would come back up, and I'm saying, if you went and lowballed that, if you went and price out the drop or whatever it's called in the share market game, but it was interesting.
But just to pick up on that point, I mean, look at our dear president. The things that come out of his mouth have a major impact on world events. Leadership is the most important thing. Now, to be fair, most leaders are ordinary people. They're people like you and me. They're not born leaders. They don't have magical leader powers. They don't wake up in the morning and take leadership juice. It just doesn't work like that, right? So it's a work in progress. Every leader is working. I think the difference is some leaders know it. Like I've got a client. She's very conscious of that she needs to be a better leader, and every day she reminds herself of that, and every day she tries to be a better leader. That's the most important thing, but also understanding what are you there for as the leader, and I think understanding your strengths and weaknesses, because different leaders have different strengths and weaknesses.
Totally.
And if someone's a great charismatic person, a great flag bearer, flag waver, a great champion of the business cause, and that's what they're great at, then do that. But don't go and spend too much time with the accountant, because you're just going to piss the accountant off, right? Because they're trying to do their job,
Rob, one more thing I'm going to throw your way as you sort of get into the end of the show is if an organization, individual is sort of feeling stuck at the moment, what is one thing you think they should look at, first things to look at, sort of to get themselves unstuck? We're living in an interesting time and place in New Zealand specific at the moment. Think of high costs, high unemployment. Look, how high unemployment isn't as high as everywhere else in the world, but there's high unemployment. Organizations that's cost of living crisis, running a business crisis. There's a lot on us.
It's a very tough trading environment.
Yeah, right at the moment. So there'll be heaps of business owners, irrespective of a business of a one-man business to large corporates at the moment that's going to feel tentatively or possibly stuck.
Yeah.
Where from your thought process is where do you go first?
Yeah.
No, I'm not asking you to fix it, but where do you go first?
Yeah. Look, I think if I'm a business owner and I'm stuck right now, and I can't figure out where to go, what to do with my business, this is going to sound like a pitch, and it's not intended as that. But I think it's really useful to get somebody in just so you can have that conversation. Because, otherwise you're living in your own head. The only advice you're really getting is from the people who are in the same, the same mud pool as you're in, right? Your managers, your team, etc. So it is helpful to get someone in. Just even if all you're going to do is spend a few hours, a few days together working through some stuff. It might help you to look at your business more objectively. So I didn't intend that as a pitch. It might sound like that, but I think the key thing is we're human beings, right? And there's only, as human beings, there's only three places we can be, right? One place is the present, the other place is the past, and the other is the future. And we spend a lot of time shifting between the past and the future. We're thinking about the past, we're holding on to things from our past, or we're imagining the future, right? And we don't spend a lot of time in the present. So having someone come in and help you kind of say, right now, what is happening in our business? What does it mean for our business? Now, what are we going to do about it? That's really, really important. At Prime, we talk about this concept we call frozen, and it sort of comes from, as mammals, and the reptiles as well. When you're under attack, what do you fight, flight, or freeze? Fight, flight, or freeze. We often find businesses who feel like they're under attack, they're in a state of fright, or they may be frozen, right? The thing I notice a lot of the time, not always, but when people are stuck, the reason they're stuck is they're holding on to the past. This is what we do. This is what we've always done. This is what worked in the past. And they're struggling to go, the world is changing around me. And this is one of the things I say to all my clients. The world is in a constant state of change. And you have to accept that, right? And you have to adapt and evolve within that state of change, right? And the businesses that succeed anticipate those changes, and they evolve as businesses in anticipation of that, and they also develop a portfolio of strategies. So typically they're not one-hit wonders, because if your business is making leather whips for horse and buggies.
I was hoping you were going to say that.
Or one day your leather whips are going to go out of fashion because nobody's driving a horse and buggy anymore, right? So you might move to leather upholstery for the thing that replaces the horse and buggy, right? What was it? The automobile.
Yeah, automobile.
The automobile, yeah. So I think it's about adapting. It's about evolving. And the kinds of conversations that I'm having with clients who are stuck is trying to understand where they are and why they're stuck. And then one of the questions that I tend to put A to myself and B to the client is, where will I go to find growth? The where question is a really, really important one. If I ask a client, what will we do to find growth. They go, well, that's why we got you here. Give us the answer, right? Where will we go? So the where question, basically you start thinking about products, markets, customers, things that are changing in the world around us, opportunities. It opens up your way of thinking. So if, going back to the example of the guy that makes whips for horse and buggies, if he starts going, where are the opportunities? He might say, well, where are the other places that people want whips? Okay, the S&M industry, I might go there, right? Or I might go, I don't know that whips is the way to go, but maybe I could do upholstery.
Yeah.
Maybe I could do other things that require, really, really fine leather work. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that's a great example, but it is an example.
Oh, totally is.
We'll run with it.
We'll run with it.
But yeah, the where question's a really, really important one. Once you sort of dealt with what's happening now, because, you and I have talked about this before, Lawrence, I always ask these three questions, which is what, so what, now what?
Yeah.
And once again, I'm asking myself those questions as much as I'm asking my client. What the hell is happening here right now?
Mm-hmm.
So what? What does that mean for us? What are the implications? What are the opportunities that are arising from that? What are the challenges? What are the problems, etc.? So what? Yeah. And then the most important thing, now what? And I think a lot of business and business coaches actually, they stop at the so what. They're not so good at and I think this is what I learned from corporate life. You can't just be a really clever bastard, if you're going to be a clever bastard, you've also got to be a clever bastard that gets shit done, right? That's what you get rewarded for in corporate life. And certainly in companies like Coca-Cola and Heineken, the clever bastard that gets shit done and grows the business is the guy that gets rewarded, right? So that's what we're sort of thinking about is where to from here. That's the now what piece, yeah.
It's so true, Rob. Look, one more question I got for you. What is next? What is next for you for Rob and all of this and the growth coach? Yeah. What's the vision for 2026 for yourself into next year? What's next on the table for anyone that's out there that's really interested in see what you said and heard and the rest of it? Where's Rob Bree in 12 months'
I think
time?
what's driving me at the moment, Lawrence, and it has been driving me for the last couple of years. But I've had health issues, and I'm sort of hopefully back, getting myself sorted. What I really want to do over the next 1-2 years and beyond is find ways of helping more businesses. The type of work I do at the moment. Our method is we try to spend 2 hours a week every week with a client, right? And over time you shift that client from A to B, whatever that looks like. And in my world, shift them from survivor to growth mode, right? What I want to do is be able to do that for more businesses more often. So it might be that the model changes. I'll still have my core clients that I have now, and hopefully one or two more. But I'm also looking at ways of, can I do this in a way where more people benefit? So it might be things like running workshops, seminars, that type of thing. I mean, I'm still thinking through that. At the moment, this whole the 90 videos in 90 days that we've been working on, that's all about just putting myself out there and saying, here I am, this is what I believe I can do to help you. If you need help, pick up the phone, pick up your computer, get in touch, even if it's just a conversation that goes on for a few hours or a few days, I guarantee I can provide some value. Because, you don't do this stuff for 40 plus years and not learn a thing or two along the way,
Totally. So you just did a call out to everyone if they're interested to pick up the phone or pick up, search you up and stuff. How would they find you?
Well, they can find me on LinkedIn. Just Google Rob Bree. I'm all over that, all over Google. But rob@robbree.com if they want to email me. But go into LinkedIn, click on the button. It's all there.
Everything's there.
I make myself pretty visible. maybe that's a risky thing to do, but I do. And pretty thick-skinned. I've been abused by the best, Lawrence.
But Rob, awesome. Thanks so much for today's time and talking through and everything what you do and you stand for. If anyone else out there, I've been working with Rob for a good few months. I can say from a growth point of view and a strategy point of view and that sort of stuff, it's amazing, the knowledge, everything out there. So if anyone's interested in taking their business to that next step, even taking their mindset to the next step and needing that support, Rob's the person.
Just wanting to think differently.
Yeah, just wanting to think differently.
Borrow that from Steve Jobs. Think different. Or is that IBM? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to get in trouble now.
Call them all out, right? But anyway, a massive thanks, Rob. And any last thing you want to say before we finish off today?
No, I think the piece of advice I'd give to anybody is if you find something that's really important and you want to do it, you don't know what to do, the rule I apply to myself, do something.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing worse than being frozen. If you just do something, then you'll begin to figure out what comes next. I think a lot of people have got something to offer the world, a really great idea or something they really want to do, and they never start because they're afraid of failing, right? And I used to work with this guy. He was a French guy. This particular guy was Belgian. And I would talk with him about stuff. This was in my beer days, and I'd say, his name was Roland. What do we do, Roland? What do you want to do? I've talked him through something that I think we should do, and he goes, we must start.
Mm-hmm.
We must start, and it was just take that first step. Yeah, take a first step that's low risk.
Yeah,
don't bet the farm. Don't go to the casino. Right, take a very small step that's relatively low risk, but will give you the opportunity to test your thinking and to get a little bit of feedback from the market. And sometimes that feedback's going to be negative, and that's okay, because at least you learn something. Yeah.
Totally.
Those are my words of wisdom for today, Lawrence.
Totally. Awesome, Rob. A great way to end it off. And everyone that's listening or watching the content with Rob Bree here, thanks for supporting, and make sure you reach out if you need some help from Rob.
Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you, sir.